Happy Monday, guys. What's going on?
Happy Monday. We're excited to be with you. Welcome to Say That channel and our Monday Rundowns. Our Monday Rundowns are specifically so that we can talk about things that Winston and I just feel like are pushing the needle, ideas, thoughts, mindsets, just things that we feel like we would love to learn about and we hope that you love to learn about too. And a lot of these questions are generated by you guys, our audience.
Yeah. I also think, just to add to what you say, Janelle, there's also a factor of outside of the scope of maybe the numbers in a business or the mindset and all that, there are other aspects of life that are obviously still happening for many of us. And if you aren't addressing some of those areas, or if you aren't even aware that you may have things that you can be working on in those areas, then you could be stunting the growth of your business. We found through a lot of the episodes that we've been looking at just how, even like today's topic, how just your overall mood or your happiness level could be affecting a lot of other areas, like we've talked about in terms of your business. So excited to have our Monday rundowns and to talk about today's topic. Let's jump
All
into it.
right.
Today's topic, guys.
Can we rewire our minds for lasting happiness? I'm going to say that the answer has to be yes.
Yeah.
Somebody had to have figured this out, right?
Actually, I'm going to say no.
You're going to say no. You don't think it can be lasting happiness. You think it's short-lived?
There's that, and there's an concept that or a way of thinking that I've started to adapt to, which is you need contrast or you need conflict in your life, because from it you have greater desire for other things, right? Like if you didn't have a negative thought about your car, you probably wouldn't have the desire for a nicer car or newer car or whatever the more is. I think is when we dwell in those negative states that we find ourselves in depression and maybe doing things that we don't necessarily want to do. But if you can recognize that the unhappiness that you're feeling now is going to open itself or open you up to something greater, and if you can kind of move to that state faster, you may not spend as much time. But I don't know if lasting happiness is really, what would that even look like if there was nothing that was ever, you know what I mean, like bothering you.
Fair enough. And maybe it's contentment. So maybe even in the bad times.
Yeah, that's exactly. Look at that. Yeah. You can still recognize the good that's going on around you, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I remember even like thinking like, man, I'm gonna lose my house. This is like back in the day with like even the thing that got me into like network marketing. But and not being able to at that point still be thinking, dude, you have a bed right now. You have a place to sleep. It's like kind of just being able to recognize both things. Yeah, sure, you want to go out and build this business, make more money to do this, but you also have a space. Because now looking back on it, I would have just been very different in that time had I known what I know now, or if I was able to look at it the way I can see it now. I would have just enjoyed the time. I'm sure even with you. Remember when we were traveling, and I would have just enjoyed that period of time, just taking it in way more. I try to do that now. So I love this question. But who do we got on the docket today who's going to jump in and share their thoughts?
So we're bringing back our friends at Big Think.
Nice.
And I can't wait to hear what they have to say. I mean, so far they've been hitting home runs.
Facts. All right, start that one up, Jay. Let's jump into it, guys.
All right, here we go.
The sad thing is that we're really not wired for happiness. Natural selection honestly doesn't care how we feel. It really just wants us to survive and reproduce. And that doesn't necessarily involve being happier. People are less happy than they ever have been. In the United States, around 40% of college students report being too depressed to function most days. We see the same kind of thing in older individuals. We're doing something wrong. We have all these misconceptions when it comes to the simple things we could all be doing to feel better. I'm Laurie Santos. I'm a professor of psychology at Yale University and host of the Happiness Lab podcast. I study the science of happiness.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
In order to feel happier, we really need to come to terms with the fact that our mind is kind of lying to us. We experience what psychologists like Dan Gilbert and Tim Wilson have called miswanting. Miswanting is the act of trying to go for certain things that we assume are going to make us feel happy, but then they don't make us as happy as we think. Because there are these annoying features of the mind that cause us to get happiness wrong. And one of the biggest annoying features of the mind is the fact that we all have these intuitions about the kinds of things we should be doing to feel better. But the research shows that many of those intuitions are just incorrect. Take, for example, money. So many of us think that if we just got more money, we'd feel happier. But if you have enough money to put food on the table and a roof over your head, more money isn't going to make you happier. The same is true for so many things. Getting a promotion, material possessions, getting married. We kind of get the Rolling Stones idea wrong. We think the problem is that we can't always get what we want. The problem is that if we got what we wanted, we probably still wouldn't be happy because we want the wrong things. A second annoying feature of the mind is the fact that we tend to not think in objective terms. We tend to compare all our outcomes in life to something else. This is what's known as setting a reference point. We're constantly comparing what we have to other people. Compare our salaries, compare our looks, compare how happy our marriage is, even compare how much sex we're getting. And that's a problem because it means we could be doing objectively quite well in life. But as long as there's somebody out there who's doing better than us, we're going to feel bad. Another annoying feature of the mind is that our minds tend to get used to stuff. When you first have an experience, it's glorious. But over time, you kind of get used to it. This is what researchers call hedonic adaptation. It means that things that initially impact our happiness a lot, they stop having the same impact over time. There's an additional problem with hedonic adaptation, which is that we don't really know that it's happening. And that leads to an additional bias that's known as the impact bias. We assume that if something good happens, it's going to impact our happiness a lot and for a really long period of time. But the evidence suggests it doesn't. We're biased about the particular impact that any event might have on our happiness. That's the impact bias. When we think about the annoying features of the mind, the bad news is that those mistakes seem to be built in. Everyone's walking around with minds that will inevitably miswant. The real way to thwart our biases is to behave differently. There's a whole set of practices I like to call rewirements. All of us can engage with rewiring our own habits in order to change our behaviors and feel better. When we think about the behaviors that we need to change as part of our rewirements, there's one big one that comes up initially: social connection. Every available study of happy people suggests that happy people are more social. They physically spend time around other people, and they tend to really prioritize time with their friends and family members. Our lack of social connection really comes from the fact that we have this strong intuition that it kind of doesn't matter. There's lots of work by Nick Epley for a bias that's known as undersociality. We just systematically misestimate how good social connection will feel. Instead of scrolling through social media, use your phone to actually be a phone and call someone that you care about. These simple acts of connecting in real life, ideally, but especially in real time, can significantly improve well-being. Another behavior that we know really affects our happiness is doing nice things for other people, trying to become a little bit more other-oriented. This is a spot where we have seriously incorrect intuitions. We often think that self-care is the path to happiness, but the evidence really suggests that happy people are much more other-oriented. They're donating more money to charity. They're spending their time volunteering for others. They give more compliments. Another way that we can rewire our happiness is to change our thought patterns. Do we have a mindset of paying attention to all the negative things, all the hassles in life, or do we have a mindset that focuses more on the blessings? Lots of evidence suggests that happy people focus on the blessings. If you tend not to do that naturally, you can change that thought pattern. One fantastic way to do this is simply to just write down 3 to 5 things you're grateful for every night. And this practice can improve your well-being in as little as 2 weeks. Another thought pattern that we can engage to feel happier is paying attention to the good stuff in life. One of the reasons our good circumstances don't necessarily lead to happiness is we tend not to notice them. We'll buy a delicious latte that we should be paying attention to and savoring and really enjoying, but we just kind of chug it while we're checking our email. The act of savoring is moving towards paying attention to the good things in life a little bit more. A final way we can rewire our behavior is to make changes in our body. We often forget that bodies are connected to minds, but they really are. And that means that a really quick way to change how we're feeling emotionally is simply moving our body a little bit more. Exercise is intricately connected to our mental health. And it's important to note that this isn't like running a marathon. This is simply just getting your body to move around a little bit more. Even as much as like 20 minutes a day can really improve your well-being. These so-called rewirements, they're really useful for moving from not feeling so good at the time to flourishing a little bit more. This is not necessarily the tools that you might use if you're facing a really serious mental disorder. Sometimes people think like, oh, I'm suicidally ideating, I should do a gratitude list or so. It's like, no. That's an acute emergency, and you should really get a special, more acute kind of care. You should see a psychotherapist. Rewirements are just yet another tool in the toolkit that we can all use to be improving our own well-being. We're going to have moments of anger. We're going to have moments of sadness. We're going to have moments of fear or frustration or overwhelm. That's part of being human. Our negative emotions are signals that are telling us something really important. Our sadness is there to tell us, hey, you're missing something in life. You might need to make changes. You might need to reach out to a friend. Negative emotions are normative in certain circumstances, so we shouldn't try to wish them away. We just need to be able to regulate them in positive ways. The key, though, is that you have to put these strategies into practice. You can't just learn about them. It turns out that knowing from a cognitive science perspective, it's not half the battle. The real work is putting the things you learn into practice. When we understand the right things to do and put those things into practice, we really can significantly change our levels of happiness.
Right on.
This was so good.
No, that was excellent. All right, final thoughts.
What really stood out to me was actually the number one, how social connection really is important, and those people who identify as happier have strong social connections, in so much so as they prioritize them. A couple of reasons why this stands out to me. Number one, I've been watching a lot of K-dramas lately. Those in my inner circle know this. And I have found it really interesting how a part of culture in Korea is like literally what she said, prioritizing social connections. Like it's normal to prioritize friends and family time. Like that is like a thing people do. And when you don't do it, people are like, what's going on? Right? Like immediately pay attention. And it really resonated with me, the study that she brought up that shows that there's this weird thing. I think it's an American thing, especially. I can't say for the rest of the world, but I identify with this idea that like in America, it feels like it's okay to not be social, like prioritize self first almost. And then like the social stuff, you don't need to be social. Like you don't need to like be around other people. I feel that sometimes, like sometimes that's almost like, whether it's social media, like, yeah, you're being social by reaching out to people on social media. When we all know that's not really it.
That's not it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then lastly, I'll just say that recently I have been reaching out to people that I haven't spoken to in a really long time. And I get off these conversations. Many people think I'm an extrovert because they see me around other people and I talk to other people and I have no problems doing that. But that's not the definition of an extrovert. The definition of an extrovert is somebody who gets energy from other people. I actually don't get energy from other people. I get it from myself. So after I talk to a ton of people or I'm around a lot of people, I need to be by myself in order to regenerate energy within myself. So I've been reaching out to people and connecting with people, and it's been amazing. Like I've been enjoying like being with people, and then or reconnecting with people, picking up the phone, right? Like seeing people in person. But then what's also funny is then like I really need the time at home to recharge as well when I get home. But it's been like every time I do it, I'm never sad for doing it, right? Like I'm not like, oh my God, I spent all this energy. I think each time I do it, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I reconnected with this person. Like it's so important. And this hearing what she said just, I guess, affirms that thought. Like, Janelle, this
Yeah,
isn't
further
just
validates it.
feeling like this feels good. This actually is like a thing. It's a thing that you need. You
Yeah.
need to do this. Anyway, so those are my thoughts. Like, man, our society in America, I feel like there's like a culture of like you don't need to be around people. You can be by yourself, and that's actually not really true.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny because our perspective would only allow us to see what we are experiencing, right? Where I'm sure there's a ton of groups that are out there, and all they do is be social. The thing that stood out to me was the awareness of what your emotions are saying. So if you're sad, it actually may be your body's way of saying to you, hey, pay attention, something's going on here, or hey, yeah, you are missing a social connection. You should reach out to your friend, that you know what I mean, or whatever that person you're whatever that I it could be. So I love that. I've been learning just to reevaluate emotions,
Mm.
and just the way, like when you're mad, it's not what that's not what your, well, inner being or whatever, to get too crazy, but it's trying to tell you right now. It's not that you're mad. It's it's probably just how you're looking at this right now that's incorrect. And taking a second to be like, oh, I am angry, but what's going on? You know what I mean? And I've heard this even in talking to being defensive with people. Like if you meet somebody and they're super angry, a way to kind of disarm the situation is by stopping and going, dude, what's wrong? It is not to feed into the anger, but to ask the person, hey, what's going on with you? Because that's probably not their normal. You know what I mean? People usually get into a fit of rage. So it's like, what's going on? What just set you off? Kind of open that dialogue. And it also throws them off because now they're like, oh, wait, what? You're asking me about me right now? It kind of is one of those things. So go ahead.
Right.
I saw I cut you off, Jay.
No, I really love that. I think that is important to recognize that what we identify as like the lower emotional states or the negative emotional states aren't bad. They're just it's your body telling you
Yeah.
something, right? It's a signal. I think also you said something like you might be like looking at it, you might be looking at a situation like incorrectly or something like that. But I would say sometimes you are looking at a situation correctly. I've gotten really angry about certain injustices for what it's worth, or a way that somebody, myself or other people around me, are treated. And like being mad is okay. It doesn't mean that I'm looking at the situation incorrectly. It could just be my body's reacting to something that I feel like is unjust. So I bring that up to say, like, sometimes it is a reaction to just what is. I think the next step might be like, well, what can we do differently, or like how can we change this? Certainly. But sometimes we're like, it's okay to be angry. It doesn't mean that we're looking at something wrong, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm just reacting off of something that you said, and I was like, oh, it doesn't always have to mean that we're looking at it wrong.
That's fair. I think I'm thinking of situations that are more like hindsight. You'll look back, or there are things you were angry at some point happening when you're younger. That those same thing happens now, and it just doesn't affect you the same way. So it's both things can be true, though. So I hear you. It's not the question whether something being done to you or some situation is in fact wrong. But I also know that there are times where if you look back at something that you used to be angry about now, and the same thing may happen now, but you just don't allow yourself to get to anger. You can acknowledge something isn't right and not get angry. So that's what I hear what you're saying, and I can think both things are true. Like, oh, that person did something disrespectful. I don't know if it necessarily has to lead you to anger over time. Maybe the initial times, so you're like, oh wow, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case for all things. As to your point, it can be true in the moment.
Fair enough.
So, but overall, what do you think about or what would you say your thoughts are now on the question? Because I don't know, I think it's more, she gave tools, which I know a lot of their content, which I love, seems to do, but I don't think it was her suggesting you can create this, or maybe she was, and maybe I just didn't see that part.
Yeah, I think the lasting happiness for our question, it was answered in that we're going to have the negative emotions, just like you said, right? Like we're going to have them. And then she did provide us with tools for how to understand the negative emotions.
And what to do.
So that way, I think it's ultimately, maybe it's not lasting happiness. Maybe it's that the happiness just outweighs the unhappiness.
Yeah, more of it.
You'll never not be unhappy, or you're never not going to be sad. You will be. There will always be times where you're feeling the opposite of happy. Let's just say that. But
yeah, I think, like I said,
time, there are
you
more
can shape
times.
that.
Yeah.
Your statement, like I said, was true. I think you can be. I think there are moments that that's gonna just happen, and from it, it's where you know is what we like. What will you do from that? Hey, and let me not be around this person anymore. Or when I notice these signs, because I noticed it, this, now I'll get a sense that this may be happening, or I'm gonna be triggered, or you know what I mean.
Right.
I know that was something for me. Even learning triggered at one point, and then learning, well, what does it really mean for you to say that and not just be using that as a term? There are states that must lead you to feeling triggered. You know what I mean? For myself, anyway, and that was kind of where that went. So, I really love the content that these people provide and the people that they have. Yeah, it's really, really good. But we'll leave it here till next time, right?
Yes. And so, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
Say that. We'll see you guys on Wednesday. Have a good week, guys.